Good morning and welcome to Moments with Melinda. Today, my guest is Vijay Singh. Hi, Vijay. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on my show. Well, let me tell my viewers a little bit about you. Vijay Singh is the CEO of Vermont Public. He began his career as a documentary filmmaker, and his storytelling won awards and brought attention to important issues. He then moved into leadership roles in the private sector and at NPR stations where he expanded digital platforms, created new programming, and grew audiences by reaching more people in new ways. I'm sure there's a lot, I know there's a lot more about you because I researched you. Well, anyway, welcome to my show, my friend. Thank you for taking the time on this beautiful day. So, Vijay, let's start at the beginning. You were born in Pennsylvania, as was I, two Pennsylvania people, and you grew up in Bloomingburg, a small town in upstate New York. Can you share a bit about your childhood and how your upbringing helped shape your career?
Bloomingburg is a wonderful part of New York. It actually reminds me a lot of Vermont. It's a very rural area. You know, our claim to fame is one stoplight in our town. I don't know exactly what the population was, but probably 1,500 maybe. But you know, it was. I also grew up in a trailer park, and that was an interesting experience because it's the Hudson Valley, so there's a big socioeconomic mix. But as you can imagine, in a trailer park, you know, we're an immigrant family, a lot of working class families there. But it was its own sort of tight-knit community. So grew up in a rural area and a community within that community. And so I think that shapes a lot about how I think about the world, and especially how I think about media, and public media in particular. Again, being an immigrant family, we're one of the only families of color in the trailer park, in the, the general area. And so public media, you know, from Sesame Street to Morning Edition was a connection to the world for me and really, you know, helped me connect in ways that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
So, what did your parents do, and do you have siblings?
Yeah, so I have an older brother and an older sister. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and then eventually started working for the school system, all the way up to becoming a board member of our school system.
Wow.
And my dad is a radiologic technician. He has yet to retire. Every year he says he's going to retire, but doing X-rays and CT scans and so on. So he's worked in the hospital system for his whole career.
Well, your family must be very, very proud of you. So now you graduated from Ithaca College and you moved into documentary filmmaking. Talk to us about some of your films and where my viewers can see your work.
Not much is available. A lot of the work I was doing was before everybody would put stuff online. But one of the first documentaries I worked on was called um, uh, goodness, I'm blanking on the title right now.
Well, it's on your website. They're all listed. I mean, it's all there. A lot of your work, a lot of your short films.
Yes.
Yeah.
This documentary was about a gentleman who was a freedom fighter in Burma during the revolution in the 80s. Eventually arrived in the States and started sort of bringing attention to what was happening in Burma, now Myanmar. When we meet him in this documentary, Honoring Home, that's the title, finally remembered it. He is dealing with stage 4 cancer.
Oof.
And so we're kind of following him and his family dealing with that, but also the movement that he helped build. You know, we have footage from his first hunger strike in front of the UN in the early 90s, I think that was, to the last time, his last visit, unfortunately, before he dies, where there is now a huge movement. And so telling his story, telling the story of that movement in Burma, which I mean, this documentary, I forget when we released it, but in the 2010 probably. And so much has changed since then. Still very relevant in terms of understanding the history of what happened there. But again, really a story about this gentleman and the movement he helped to lead.
Have you ever thought about taking some of your films and digitizing them and getting them up on Vermont Public?
Uh, I really try to make sure that I don't use my position as CEO of Vermont Public to circumvent a process we would have otherwise. And I'm very proud of the work I did. You know, a lot of the stuff I worked on, even honoring home, I was a part of a larger team. And so I don't know that even that one I would say is like solely my work. So the stuff that's solely my work is in a different sort of category that I wouldn't necessarily fit public media in general. But again, if I were going to do something like that, I would put it through the same process that we put everything else through. There's a really high
Oh,
bar here, and I haven't been an individual creator in a long time. So I don't know that that stuff would pass
well,
muster in terms of what we do.
they show all my husband's films, so I'm sure they could show yours. The other thing you could do is you could do a retrospective and show it at like the Main Street Landing Film House. I think people would be very intrigued to see the work that you did. Um, so that's just my 2 cents. So now you moved from filmmaking into leadership roles in the private sector, including Carfax, UBM Canon, and Hybrid Vigor. These sound like technology jobs. So talk about these positions and how they prepared you for your work in public television.
Yeah, so really, if I back up for a second to explain how I arrived in these positions, you know, from film school to the documentaries I made, including Honoring Home, you know, documentaries and my attempt to break into the Hollywood system for a period, it wasn't paying the bills. And so I paid my way through film school and I made my living by being a digital tinkerer. So I was making websites and apps. And so I built a skill set for building digital things right at the moment when there was a lot of attention and energy around the digital transformation. And so I ended up in a role known as product manager. It's a role that sort of leads the team of designers and engineers in building an app or a website or something along those lines. So I was paying my bills doing that and really still working on the media side of things, still working to tell stories. But I was pretty good at the technical end of that stuff and also translating between all the different types of teams, right? Like a lot of times these projects are successful or unsuccessful when engineers can't communicate to designers and can't communicate to the customer or the C-suite. So I really found a good fit there, and then eventually married these two worlds together. So the first time I did this, UBM Canon was again going through the digital transformation, trying to take print magazines and figure out a way to make them digital. But it was really when I got to KPCC in Southern California. It's now known as LAist Radio. That's the NPR station or one of the NPR stations in LA. And I married these worlds of product management and my background and expertise in media.
Fascinating. So now you have been described as a strategic thinker, a problem solver, and someone who embraces gnarly problems. Would you agree with that? And what would you say has been the most difficult problem you have had to face in your career?
Yes, I think you know I'm a glutton for punishment. The more gnarly the problem, the more interesting to me. I don't know. I really I find fulfillment in solving really difficult problems, or at least it's interesting to turn around things that are seemingly impossible, or the more intractable is the more it attracts me in some way. Um, you know, there have been a lot of challenging things, even in my short time here in Vermont. The loss of our federal funding is not insignificant. We are still dealing with that now. But really, my experience at Cap Radio in Sacramento was probably the hardest thing I've ever dealt with in my career. And the short version of that is, you know, they were dealing with an immense amount of financial problems. The previous GM is now accused of stealing over $1 million. There were so many things that were creating the financial issues that they had there. And when I was asked to step up and help the organization through a tumultuous summer, at any given day we should have gone out of business. And figuring out how to get through every single day that summer was an immense challenge. But I think it also set me up for believing in myself. Like dealing with that problem gave me the faith to say, "Oh, there is no problem too big. We can figure it out."
Fascinating. So now prior to joining Vermont Public, you did serve as the content officer at Cap Radio, which was a national public radio affiliate in Sacramento, California area. So talk to us about your work there. And that's you just talked to us about the tumultuous time that you had there. And that was the most difficult experience in your career was to deal with that. Did you turn it around?
Yes, and again, it wasn't just me, but I think I was myself and another senior leader. We were asked to take over when the GM was essentially let go, and everything from sort of corralling the folks who were making our product every day, the folks who were on our air and making the news and so on. Morale at Cap Radio had been pretty bad for a long time, and this only made it worse. So we were trying to just keep everybody going through that summer. But then again, it was the financial side of the house and figuring out what happened, how did we get into this position, and then how do we deal with it going forward. So I was in essentially in charge of all internal operations, eventually from content to everything else. And again, I was a key part of it. I'm proud of the work that I did there. And I sort of helped it get over that hump. But there are lots of other folks there who I do think they're turned around now, not completely out of the woods. But there were folks after me, certainly, who like continued that original push to turn things around.
So thank you for that. Can you discuss the launch of the Sacramento KNOW newsletter? Was this a digital product?
Yes, so that was I was originally hired before all this explosion of Cap Radio. I was hired to help with the digital transformation there. Again, that's sort of a through line of my career, and that was a brand we created and one of the first true digital products that they created. And it's still, I think, one of their best digital products. And really, the reason why we called it Sacramento. First of all, KNOW, and it's an informational newsletter, news newsletter. But also in Sacramento, if you're from Sacramento, you don't pronounce the T, right? So it's Sacramento, and so it's like a lot of words and phrases in Vermont. But that's a little wink at the locality, right? So in public media, we're always concerned about local service, and so it was triangulating all those things.
You're very creative. You're a creative soul.
And that was all due to the team. I did not come up with that name.
Well, that's the thing that I'm going to talk to you about right now. You are known for your willingness to work, and I don't even know if this is a word, but it just seemed right. Linearly, 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 rather than top down. You have an ability to understand people and to give them their voice. Talk to us about that management style and how it has served you in the organizations you have worked for. Because that's not the management style I grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I mean, it was always top down and stick your thumb. But you are very open-hearted and you bring people together and you make stuff happen. Talk to us about that.
I mean, I try my best to always sort of have that approach. And it's a difficult thing to balance, especially in the world of media, because I think at a certain point you do need a leading voice. You need somebody to say, this is the general direction we're heading in. But I think I've found in my career, first of all, I came up under the style of leadership you described. And I saw so many places where the end result was way worse than it could have been if only, so many other people, their voices were heard. Not necessarily that all of their ideas were great, but if there was a little bit more feedback included rather than just the vision of the person at the top, we would have been so much better off. And so that was certainly influential on my style. And I found through experience, look, I'm not shy to share my ideas or to say, I think this is really the right answer. But so many times I have been proven right to take this approach, Sacramento being one of the examples. I don't even remember what my favorite idea was to start, but I said, here's what I think, here's the direction I should go in. But design team, digital team, you go work on it and then bring back your best ideas. And they came back with that idea and it was great. And so the end result is so much better the more voices are included. Again, this does not mean everybody's feedback is included one-to-one or anything like that. But this tension of ideas, the more contrasting the idea, the more we argue about the idea, I think is the best end result. And so, again, if I enter a room and think I have the only best idea, we're not going to get to so much other potential that's out there. And again, that's served me well in my career so far.
I for 50 years I had that style. And it's pretty attributable to women in many ways because that's how we worked in, barbaric times sitting around the fire trying to figure things out. But what I would do is we would throw it in the middle of the table and it was owned by everybody and
Yep.
everybody owned it. So now you talk about getting to know the people behind the stories. Can you talk more about that?
I don't know what can you remind me the context of that?
Well, I think in the work that you've done, like whether it's your documentary work or your work in Vermont Public, the stories that are told, it's
Yeah,
not just the story that you are wedded to or that you're interested in. You want to get behind the story and know the people. And
for
I
sure.
mean, I'm assuming you're a very people person to want to do that because not all producers and directors and CEOs do that, and that takes a special gift. So I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah, so I think storytelling and my there's so many different beautiful ways of telling stories, but if we boil down stories to their root, or at least the way I think about it, is the course of change for a character. And so, especially when that's a especially in the world of fiction. So when we tell nonfiction stories, I carry that same mentality, which is what yes, we can talk about the actions that happened here, the plot, so to speak. But really, who was the person making all of this happen? Why did they make their choices? And even more so, I think one of the beautiful things about storytelling is putting yourselves in the shoes of that person. So you may not agree with them, but if you can understand why they made the decisions they made, that's a really it can have a really powerful effect on the person who's digesting that story. So, and I think this is one of the superpowers of public media. We Vermont Public, we are extremely proud of all the news we create, but we really try to make sure we focus on who are the individuals here. How do we make sure that their perspective, their story is told in the right way. And we're not just saying, here is the list of all of the things that happened related to this topic. I think when we do that, and when all storytelling does that, that's when, there's such beautiful catharsis in all kinds of different ways.
You really do bring your documentary and filmmaking vibe and energy and education into your work. So now you have talked about public media serving everyone, but you also have a great responsibility to ensure your work serves historically marginalized communities. You care about that. So living in one of the whitest states in the country, how does Vermont Public meet that goal for you?
We look, public media overall in Vermont Public has been trying to do this for a very long time. The goal of serving minorities was in the Corporation for Public Broadcasting Act when public media was really founded in this country. And I think it's for good reason, right? Like the sort of really baseline reasoning behind this choice is because commercial entities will often ignore marginalized communities. So if public media is meant to serve everyone, then we have to make a concerted effort to serve the folks who would otherwise be underserved. To me, it's even more basic than that. It's a core American ideal, which is no matter where you come from, no matter what your identity is, if this is meant for everyone, then you should be included. And I think our approach going forward is not necessarily to say, and it's not to say that other approaches are wrong. It's just what I think is a nice evolution on the idea of trying to be inclusive. But it's not that we carve out a lane for this minority and that minority. It's to say, how do we make our core service more inclusive, no matter what your identity is? And I think if we do that well, we can serve what is the dominant culture of Vermont, but we can serve all of the other types of identities as well. And that's a big challenge because our media habits, the way we shape stories and products today, are very much derived from what the dominant culture is. So we're going through this evolution right now at Vermont Public, but I think it's that core idea of, again, not saying like this thing needs to be different to serve that community. How do we bring that community in to everything else that we're doing?
Thank you so much for that. So just in my research, you have been described as someone with a tremendous amount of empathy. So now you were hired after they merged Vermont ETV or Vermont Public Television. It used to be Vermont ETV back in my day, and Vermont Public Radio, and they renamed the organization Vermont Public. Now, talk to us about that decision. And it caused quite a bit of stir here in Vermont because Vermonters don't necessarily like change, not even in the weather, but they deal with it. So, talk to us a little bit about that and where you landed on that, and share that with my viewers.
So that the merger of Vermont Public Radio and Vermont PBS happened before I arrived at Vermont Public.
Mhm,
So I'm privileged to join the organization, about 4 years after that merger happened.
mhm.
And I know I'm very familiar with how it was received, from the choice in the name to the very idea that these two things should be put together. What I can tell you is on the other side of it, and again, I'm privileged to come in after most of that happened. Um, it was the right decision for lots of different reasons. You will see across the nation, especially now that federal funding is no longer a thing for public media, that this will happen more and more because there's so much crossover between the television side and the radio side, and even more so in 2026. All of the distinctions between what channel it's on, it is mattering less and less. So really, we think about our core service as a thing. That service eventually makes its way to radio and eventually makes its way to television, but it also lives on our website, lives on our social media channels, and so on. So if we're serving Vermonters, if we are helping to inform and educate and share culture, and we're connecting the community, it doesn't matter what channel we do it on. And so in that sense, finding efficiencies behind the scene, right, rather than having two executive teams leading
Development
these two
directors or
organizations.
two,
Yeah,
exactly. No.
yeah.
And I,
So
yeah.
in the end, I think it was the right decision for Vermont to make the best use of all of our resources to continue to execute public media at a high level for the state.
I think people are into it now. I think they really get it. And that should happen with a lot of the nonprofits in Vermont. Is it would be great if some of them could merge and share services and share their administrative team because we'd save a lot of money. So now we're going to get into some of the financials here. So according to your website, your FY25 budget was 20.59 million. So three-quarters of your funding goes directly to content. That's about 14.6 million or 73% programming. It's about 2.6 at 12.9%, and development is 13.5, 2.7 for administration. So I'm curious about where your money comes from, um, and how that's broken down and how you were affected when the federal funds were shut down, because this is an organization with over 100 employees that serves the entire state. And how are you functioning? And where is the bulk of the money coming from?
So I'll say we're how can I step through this in a clear way? So federal funding made up about 10% of our budget. So when we lost federal funding, that was a significant blow.
Oh,
And also because federal funding was 2 years forward funded. So we not only lost it for last year, but we were expecting it in this upcoming year as well. So 10% is not an insignificant amount to have to make up. And so federal funding was about 10%, no longer. But the other major areas, the biggest area are individuals who give us donations. And some folks are able to give us quite a bit in sort of one period. And a lot of folks, we have about this point, 46,000 members. A lot of folks give us something like $10 a month. And so that is where the great majority of our funding comes from. We also have a lot of businesses in the area who have the same mindset. Some of that comes in the form of underwriting, which is a form sort of similar to advertising that you'd hear on commercial stations. The difference is there's far more limits on what can be said. But again, they're supporting us in a different way. And some businesses also essentially give us a donation because, again, they're supportive of this work in the same way individuals are. We also make a small amount of money in terms of the overall pie, in terms of sort of renting out space on our towers to cell phone companies and so on. But again, the majority of our operations, and especially now after federal funding, now all of it is essentially coming from the community of Vermont. And the surrounding areas. So we have some donors in Quebec and Montreal. We have some in New Hampshire because our signal goes out there in New York and Massachusetts as well. But again, it's coming from community members who support this work. That's
well,
the simplest way to describe it.
from all of us.
Yeah,
And
100%.
Yeah, from all of us. And you also have a Vermont public passport. And that generates income for you for people who want to watch programs in NPR and they want to do it through your talk a little bit about that, about the Vermont Public. And by the way, to my donors, go online to Vermont Public and make a donation. No donation is too small. And please do that. If you enjoy what you hear and see from Vermont Public, support this because the federal government has pulled their funding and it deserves to be supported. So go do that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so Passport is something that comes out of the sort of PBS offering that we have. So not only you can always watch it on cable, or if you're able to get the broadcast signal, you can watch it for free in that sense. And Passport is essentially the sort of streaming option for PBS content and Vermont public content.
Yeah.
So if you download the PBS app on your television or on your smartphone or tablet, and you donate at least $8 a month, then you get access to the majority of everything available from PBS. So it's essentially, a much cheaper Netflix, or you name the streaming service.
And better
So that
shows.
Yeah,
Better shows. I mean,
I agree.
so to my viewers, please, if you have, Firefox or whatever, just go and get Vermont Public Passport, $8 a month, and you have access to everything. So talk to us a little bit because you are relatively new in this job. What are some of the strategic plans and goals that your board and staff and the community members that you've brought into this process have put forth for Vermont Public over the next several years?
There are a great number of things. I would say the most straightforward way of explaining it is to say that we have to reach new audiences in new ways to sustain all of our operations. So at the core of what we do is always our newsroom and our news service. This has always been true for public media, but I think as journalism continues to shrink
Yeah.
across this country, we're one of the last places where you can find really high quality local journalism. And that is a really expensive endeavor. And especially in a state as small as Vermont, we have to think about, okay, how do we make sure we sustain the newsroom we have and ideally actually grow this service so we can continue to have an impact in terms of local news. So all of what we're doing is to sustain that. But we have to accept that habits are changing. There are fewer and fewer people over time who will ever listen to a radio. Most people under the age of 20 don't even have access to a radio. Fewer and fewer people are subscribing to cable television. So they won't even discover the offering that we have. And that means we have to venture into the digital world more seriously. So growing audiences in places outside of our radio broadcasts and our television broadcasts, in order to eventually have a base of people who can support this work, that's a huge idea. The other thing is we've made a promise on our existing channels, on radio and on television to this community. And so we have to find a way as we venture into the digital realm with the same size team to continue to deliver that excellence. But we have to find new and different ways of doing that. And so it's a balance of these things that we're working on over the next few years to make sure we're not leaving the audience that we have behind while we build that next generation audience.
And reaching younger people. And I think that's why you were hired for this position. I think you are perfectly situated to be able to take this organization where it needs to go. I truly, truly do. So how
That's
are you
very kind
settled?
of you. Thanks.
No, I've heard this all around the state. You were really revered and highly respected. So how are you settling into life in Vermont?
Again, the place where I grew up, there's a lot of similarities, and so it feels like home to me. My wife Amanda and I, we found a home in Hyde Park that we are absolutely loving. It's tucked away up in sort of central northern Vermont. But every time I get home to Hyde Park, it feels so right to me. It feels like home. We've only been in Vermont. I've been in this job for about 2 years, but we moved into our house, I believe, last October. So a relatively short period of time. But again, it feels like home, and we both really love it.
Well, we're so thrilled to have you here. So what do you do for fun?
Uh, I still enjoy movies the most. That's probably the best sort of escape that I have. It's difficult for me not to watch movies now with the work that I do in mind. But my favorite moment is when I'm totally able to get lost in a really good movie, and that's one of my favorite things. I also play video games, and that's a nice thing. Sort of, I do it on my own or with some friends, that have accumulated over the course of my life. And my wife and I, we really enjoy food. We're big foodies, and so trying new and different restaurants and new types of food, that's something that we really enjoy together.
So what's a current movie you could recommend to my viewers? That you,
Oof. I saw the Odyssey this weekend. Really nice, sort of modern interpretation. For such an
oh,
old story and for a story that's been told over and over again, I think it's worth seeing in a theater.
fabulous. My favorite movie of the year was Frankenstein.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, please, please. Oh, you must just watch it for me and then
Will
just
do.
send me a text because really it's right now, especially talking about humanity and how the monster is really the human and the human is really the monster. It's extraordinary how that was created. It's extraordinary. All right. So I would like you to share your words of wisdom with my viewers as we navigate what is right now a very challenging and scary time for humanity, from climate catastrophes to the potential loss of our democracy. What helps boost you up and keep you positive?
I think this is part of the reason I really enjoy being in Vermont. Is because the community here is so small that you can't avoid talking to your neighbor. You can't avoid being face to face with people who maybe have completely different views on, you name it. Political ideology is the easiest one to point to. But I think having to acknowledge that regardless of our differences, the only way we're going to get through the winter is to figure out how we get the road plowed together. There's some magic behind that, and so I think I'm always reminded. Even when, again, I may vehemently disagree with someone's views on a particular thing, our ability to stay connected is the magic of democracy. And I think the magic of just building a world that we all want to live in together. That's not easy work because you have to examine your own ego and your own way of your own worldview, and that's really uncomfortable. But I think if we're able to do that in a realistic way, and by the way, I'm not excusing harms in any form. It's a really difficult thing to find this balance of finding a way to live alongside a neighbor you disagree with and maintaining your what you believe is your identity and your integrity and so on. But that's the hard work that it takes to get through what we're dealing with now.
Well, Vijay, I also think we do that in Vermont, in our small communities, in our churches, in our schools, and in our town meetings.
Yep.
I mean, we come together and we're all thinking different things, and we come together and we live together and we get along well. Well, I want to thank you, Vijay, for your time today to share a bit about your life and your work as the CEO of our beloved Vermont Public. I know our community is very happy to have you at the helm, and I thank you for your time on this beautiful day to spend it with me and my viewers.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, my friend.